sexy people of the internet. It is Dave, it is Duncan back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. For this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from Norwegian progressive metal band Leprous. The band's new album, Melodies of Atonement, will be released on August 30th via InsideOut Music. Routinely celebrated for their charisma and prowess as a live band, Leprous have steadily risen to prominence through their sheer quality of their work. Their most recent album, Aphelion, was a particularly imaginative and unpredictable effort that garnered yet more glowing reviews and promised to capitalise on the band's self-evident momentum. Like everyone else, Leprous had to negotiate a global pandemic and the temporary cessation of all touring, but with their customary enthusiasm for the creative process, the work has never stopped. The beginning of the process of writing melodies for the new album started right after our Aphelion tour in March last year, says frontman Einar Solberg. I came home from tour and started writing material for this album. The goal for that album was to remove all the orchestral elements and focus everything more around the actual members of the band. The symphonic parts I will take further into my solo project later on. It's a change of path in Leprous for sure. The goal was to be more straight to the point and more pure in a way to emphasise our qualities more by adding less. Leprous have always been a band driven by creative restlessness and a desire to forge something fresh with every trip to the studio. With that in mind, dedicated fans will not be surprised to learn that Melodies of Atonement is a very different album from its predecessor. Where that album was informed by a collective urge to experiment and embrace new ways of musical thinking, the new one takes an entirely different approach. We're adventurous people, and we don't like to do the same thing again and again, Solberg admits. It bores us to stay in the same musical vibe for too long, so we like to explore and see what more we can do, but at the same time keeping the essence of what Leprous is. We definitely feel that we've taken it to a new direction, but also I think it's not going to be very hard to get Leprous fans on board with this album. It's very new, but it doesn't feel very risky. It's one of the albums we've made that's the easiest to get into. It's quite instant. The new Leprous album, the Norwegian's 8th album, was once again recorded with David Castillo, who has worked with Opeth, Catatonia and so on, at the helm. Solberg speaks highly of his longtime collaborator, noting that he continues to bring the best out of everything that Leprous do. The material was then mixed by Adam Noble, who's worked with Placebo, Biffy Clyro and Nothing But Thieves, and then mastered by Robin Schmidt, who has worked with the 1975, Placebo and the Gaslight Anthem, to name a few. Okay, so with that out of the way, new Leprous album. I spoke very highly of the last album, Duncan.
It was top 10 for you, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, 5-star I dropped on that bad boy.
You did, and that was back in the day that a 5-star was rare from Dave.
Yeah.
Not these days.
No.
Yeah, man.
Here you go. I was excited to hear this new Leprous album, and it's only been...
You were higher on the previous album than me.
I couldn't remember what you scored the last one.
I don't think I was on the review. I think that was when... Wasn't that... I may be wrong. I may be talking at my ass.
I don't know.
But I think that was the week that... It might be in the same week that you reviewed LLNN.
Oh.
And I wasn't there for that. And I remember you telling me, I've just like 2 5-star albums like in one single night. And I was like, that's very un-Dave. I'm almost 100% sure.
I thought you were there. Anyway.
You were higher on it than me. It's not that I disliked it, but you were like an all chipsing guy, and I had a wee pile of chips still left on my table.
Right, okay.
I was just going to keep these here just in case. Rainy day. You know what I mean?
Rainy day. So, did you push the rest of your chips in on this album? What did you think of Melodies of Atonement?
So the big thing for me on the previous album was that, I mean, there's one right. Let's take the vocals out of the equation for a second, right?
Sure.
Because ultimately, that's where we're going to land with the vast majority of any praise that could be given at Leprous is instantly going to go to the vocals. Vocally, it's a different level, right? Like as kind of progressive music gets,
okay.
The vocals are just it's a different level. I would say you could transpose him into about 10 different genres, and he'd be probably at the top of those 10 different genres. It's not just because he's in a prog band, you know what I mean? It's not that at all. Musically, I found the previous album, how to say it without sounding a dick, I found it a bit full of itself.
Right.
I felt like tracks went on a bit too long. I felt like they laboured some points. But I thought the orchestral work in it was really quite interesting. I thought that they managed to get a really interesting balance on that. I'd heard one single from this already, and I think it's because you and Young Ross were sharing things.
Right.
And I listened to it, and when I listened to it, I was like that, ain't no symphony here. Whether like are we daring to strip that out? And then it turns out that's, according to the PR, which I don't read the press statement, that was taken out. So I was curious because I knew vocally it was going to be stellar. I was interested to see if the music underneath it was going to live up to that, because ultimately then all you have is a vehicle which looks kind of nice, but the vocals are the big standout thing for me.
Yeah.
Stripping that out has given me more refined focus on the stuff that the guitars are doing, what the rest of the band is doing, and the way they compose songs. I'm still not like fully on the Leprous bandwagon, if I'm honest. I still think there's some tracks here that are a bit long, and I'm not saying they're like 10-minute opuses or anything like that, but they're 6-minute tracks with a payoff that could be delivered in 5. I'm not saying like shorten everything down. Let me touch on the positives first, and then I'll come around to a couple of negatives that knock it down for me. Positives, without mentioning vocals to begin with, I think the production is excellent. I think the use of synths on this are excellent. I think they managed to find a combination of kind of weird quirky sims, which they use almost kind of dotted around in the production aids on that, whilst at the same time sitting them in those anthemic choruses behind the guitar work. So when a chorus kicks in, it sounds 40 times huger than anything you're going to hear this week. And like every chorus is fucking massive. I think when they played Glasgow, did they not play in an auditorium, which would fucking make sense. It sounds that way. This isn't a standing with a fucking pint of lukewarm carling, like throwing the devil horns while watching Leprous. There's a grandeur about them. There's a degree of theatric that comes with it that kind of commands a different sort of attention.
Yeah.
So I thought the use of that was really, really cool. I think the production like aids that, but I think the production also makes the guitars sound massive. The drums sound massive. Had you told me this was on Pelagic, for example, I'd be like, of course, because everything sounds fucking huge, right? I also think that the band, without that crutch of the symphonics, are actually happy to let things ring out and allow a little bit of quiet in there, which I think makes those heavier sections, although the band never really get heavy, sound a bit heavier because they're not competing with strings or horns or whatever. Yeah. They actually don't have that room there, so there's a bit more of an emphasis there as well. So that's on the positives. Vocally, we're now going to touch on vocals. It sounds fucking huge. I mean, he has levels, and then he has levels that sit on top of those levels.
Yeah.
And it does sound effortless to him. There's a bit of this delivery on this album in particular, especially when you get to tracks like My Spectre, when I was listening to go like that, this could be a Bond song. Like this could be the next James Bond 100%. Song.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It has that thing where I expect the silhouette of naked women to be kind of kaleidoscoping about it.
Yeah.
It sounds fucking massive. And a lot of their sound is attributed to how easily he can just soar up a register and then tip over into another register and then bring it back. The fact that he's saying that he's approaching it from a melodic point of view first, and I'm assuming this is what he means by that in the PR, that the band then come in and right around that, makes a lot of sense to me, because it sounds like the emphasis at all points in this is on the vocals. I'll tell you why. When the vocals are not on any section, the music is a bit derivative, right? Like there's nothing exceptional about the guitar playing, there's nothing exceptional about the synth playing, there's nothing exceptional about any other element about those vocals. I will say though, if you're a vocalist that sings like this, do you want to be singing in a band where everyone is like fucking Steve Vai and look in the background fucking, I'm trying to think of a great Joe Jordanson's on drums and like that, like do you want that? Probably not. I think the emphasis and the impact of the vocals is aided by the sparseness of what the band is actually doing, right? So that's all the great shit, right? That's all the good stuff. Negative side, and it comes down to that songwriting style that they have. Every single song sounds fucking massive and like it should be on a Bond soundtrack. The thing the album lacks is cohesiveness for me. I think you can go from song to song going anthem, 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 but there's no connective tissue between those tracks to make it sound like they should all be on the same album. Minus the fact that they've stripped out those symphonics. So there's a bit of that. I still think the back half of this album is needlessly long in parts, although there are interesting elements. So when you listen to the opening track's a bit of a weird one, and I'll come back to it at the very end. I don't think it opens with the strongest track, to be honest with you, and a lot of that's down to, let's just talk about it now. It's down to the fact that the synths that are played in there are deliberately played discordant, so they're playing kind of off notes, and then he comes in with his melody. My ear doesn't like that at all. I'd like when they cut out and the track goes to the big huge bits, love it, but that intro was like just a little bit off-putting to me. Atonement and My Spectre like just build on that. They sound like two huge anthemic songs. I Hear the Sirens is a bit of a wet squib for me. It doesn't. I know why it's there. It's filling a mood. Like a Sunken Ship is a banger. Like, to me, absolute banger. It's fucking great. And then you slip into the back half of the album where tracks are like at a minimum 6 minutes long, and that's where I started to struggle with my attention, because I'm listening to what he's doing and I realise I'm not listening to what anyone else is doing. I'm constantly focusing on what he's doing. I kind of feel like at that point, do I want this symphonic part back in it? Probably not. But at the same time, I kind of feel like the band could be taking more artistic and creative risks. It felt very safe in parts. The band acknowledge it as being accessible. It's a very accessible album, but having heard them on the previous album do more interesting stuff on the guitar, I kind of feel like it's been sacrificed here. So yeah, we're going to get so much fucking hate because of my take on this. I know it, but I got to the end of it, and my opinion on Leprous hasn't moved at all. I still think they're a band where, at the forefront, they have easily one of the best vocalists, I would say, of almost any genre walking the planet. It's charismatic, full of personality, with a range that, like, any melodic vocalist would fucking kill to have. But the band that are supporting them are doing their job and no more than their job. And I kind of want them to do more than their job. I kind of want them to put in an extra shift. I kind of want a wee bit overtime from them. And you don't get that. There is no risk on this album. If what they're saying is the risk on this album was removing all the symphonic stuff from the previous album, that's not a risk. That's just removing an element. Like, there's no risk there at all. So, yeah, my score is not going to be as harsh as it sounds. It sounds like I'm just kicking the shit out of this band. It isn't, but I would go and see Leprous live. I would not put Leprous on an end-of-year list.
Okay.
You like the band. You like the band a lot more than me. I'm hoping that you can join up the dots as to what I'm saying here in some way, shape, or form, which doesn't boil down to vocally this is amazing. The band know they have an amazing vocalist, so they support everything he does. Because that's literally how I felt at the end of this.
Yeah. Okay. So
easy job, Dave. Come on.
as I said, I fucking loved the previous album. Apelion was an absolutely incredible album for me. It was soulful, it was grand, it was emotional. It had technicality, but never too much that complicated the arrangements. And vocally, as we've said, a bit of a masterclass.
Different level.
The guy is
Honestly,
incredible.
there's a different gear. If you've never listened to Leprous before,
Yeah.
be prepared to fall in love with a male voice if you're a man. Like if he sang "Will You Marry Me," my answer would be yes. And how quick can it happen?
Yeah, I mean, I was excited, definitely excited to hear this. I'd only listened to one single, which I think
must have been the one you shared then.
Yeah. I wasn't totally sure about the track, but then this happens a lot where you hear one single and you're like, oh, I'm not too sure about that, and you hear the rest of the album and you're like, oh, wait a minute, this fucking works. This is great.
It totally works. Yeah.
So I kind of stopped after that single. I was like, I just want to listen to the rest of the album. So I mean, I was going in fairly unlubed, I suppose, into this one.
Needless.
Not really.
Needless description.
Not really
unprepared. I mean,
Unlubed.
would have been fine. Unlubed. I mean,
yeah. But I was kind of still expecting big things. And I listened to the album all the way through, straight through. I got to the end and I was like, wow, this just was totally disappointing.
Really? So is it disappointing because you agree with me, or is it disappointing because of factors I've not even taken into account?
I agree with a lot of what you've just said, to be honest.
Fine, cool.
In all honesty, I kind of started to lose interest in the album about halfway through. And it's not like this is poorly written or poorly constructed. It's not really what I was expecting, and completely different to Aphelion. But I think this is definitely the least proggy thing they've done. It's still in there, in some of the drumming and some of the riffs a little bit, but it's much more simplified musically. It is, yeah, I would agree. It's probably one of the more direct releases overall, in that it doesn't really take many detours or get heavily experimental. Like they stick to pretty much a 4/4 time signature for the majority of the tracks, and the song structures themselves are very straightforward. Yeah, I mean, and I agree with what they've said. It is a very accessible release. I would say this sits more within in line with more like a Muse kind of sound rather than like a Haken kind of sound.
You know what it reminded me of, Brett? I'm going to mention it. This is such a fucking off-kilter thing, but it's a band that you've also listened to, so I feel like we can connect on this.
Okay.
I am a huge fan of early Carpark North.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love early Carpark North.
Yeah.
It was very rock. It was very rock driven. It was
Yeah.
huge fucking sounding. It had all this mood and atmosphere, and it's another band that has a vocalist who has an amazing range in tone.
Yeah.
If I listen to anything that band has put out in the last 7 years, they've become like a pop act.
Yeah.
It's this kind of huge pop wave, and it works for them, but it bears not a huge resemblance from the band that I got into.
Yeah.
And there are sections in this album where the synths are doing a particular thing, he's singing a particular thing, and I'm like that. Oh, this is that Scandi, could be a Eurovision song if it wanted to without being cheesy Eurovision.
Yeah.
Could easily be in there and it would totally fucking work, but it doesn't resemble the version of the band. In the case of Leprous, it's not a version of a band that I've ever really liked, but it doesn't resemble the version of the band that interested me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, 2 cents.
Yeah, it's very much a switch in direction for the band, and I get that Leprous don't want to repeat themselves on each release, but on first listen, I didn't really think this was an improvement on what they'd done previously for me. The simplicity of this left me wanting much, much more from the band and the album in general, because I know what they're capable of. I personally loved the orchestral elements on Aphelion. I just thought that was a fantastic touch to that album. And for them to have been completely stripped out, it kind of lost something for me. This album is much more electronic in feel. I actually feel it's very electronic and synth kind of driven in places. Most of the tracks,
guitars, definitely.
Yeah, most of the tracks have some sort of electronic undercurrent or a synth that's kind of dictating the melody or adding a certain mood to the track. And like, don't get me wrong, I think the production and the size of the album is incredible. It sounds fantastic. I had no issues with that at all. But musically, it wasn't an instant hit with me at all. I've given this 4 listens, and I would say that it started to kind of grow on me a little bit more as I got to kind of listen 3 and listen 4. Almost like the opposite of the previous album, where it was just like instantly I heard that I was like, this is fucking incredible. But I still don't feel this is anywhere near the levels of greatness that last album had. I think if you've been a fan of Einar's solo material, then this won't be so much of a stretch for you. I think you might connect quicker with this.
Which is interesting, because in that press he's saying that all that stuff that is not on this album that was on the previous album is what's essentially going to be more in. So it makes you wonder if is he dictating that or the band dictating that?
I feel like this has way more comparisons with his solo material than it does previous Leprous material. Yeah. It's very majestic. It has, a lot of dynamic shifts, and it still has a good amount of hooks to it. Like vocally, again, Einar delivers an incredible vocal range, and on a technical level, it's very, very hard to throw shade at this.
No, you could not sing this on a karaoke though.
No,
like there's absolutely no way your voice is stretching to that.
No,
ain't happening, Dave.
I will throw a wee bit of shade though. I think
you throw shade.
I think the falsetto is overused. I think it's an incredible tool to have, and he's excellent at it. But it's almost every song, and it just started to get really on my nerves. It was so kind of repetitive. And it just
I want to defend him. Do I feel like I have that? Do I feel like I have it in me to defend a band that I was just 2 seconds ago saying I felt were lazy?
Like the first track that kicks in, that Silently Walking Alone, he sits in a completely different register, a low register for the majority of the track without resorting to falsetto at all. It's a low to mid range, and it works great. It still delivers. I actually really like the first track. I think flipping into that falsetto every now and again, absolutely fine. I just felt like as the album went on, it just started to become really overused for me. I'm not saying he's bad at it. He can nail it.
He's excellent.
Great.
At it. I see where you're coming from. I also think it fits them. Like, to me, when I was listening to this, I just imagined, like I say, auditorium stage, and I think about opera. And when I think about opera, like opera singers do that all the time. So I wonder if he's maybe approaching it. It's maybe an ego thing as well. I don't know.
I felt like less was maybe a little bit more in this case. It's also an album that sits in a very similar pace for its entirety. And I think that did have an effect on my first listen, especially. Although these tracks, like, they build, there's a lot of like quiet and like loud and a lot of layering and stuff like that. There's a lot of swaying in between serene and big crescendos. The pace never really changes. I think like A Sunken Ship is maybe the slight exception, where the end of the track picks up a little bit in speed, gets into one of the heavier moments of the album. But even then, it's not a huge change in tempo. Speaking on the heavier parts, what I will say is this release does get heavier than some of the parts on Aphelion. I do think they've reached into their past or their kind of early work and taken a little smidge of that heaviness, like maybe back from like Cole or like the Congregation, that kind of era, and they've kind of increased the heaviness a little bit on this. And I'm not saying that it sounds the same as those albums, but I feel like the level of kind of heaviness and intensity is much the same. I think my favourite example of that is probably Faceless, track 7, which is the one track that starts a little bit more experimental. It's got some kind of jazz kind of bass, a little bit of kind of piano, which I quite liked, and it leads you into quite a kind of heavy, chunky groove, where the riffs are a bit kind of more, not genty, but they've got that kind of rhythm to them. The middle part of the album was probably the part of the album I started to enjoy more as I gave it more listens, partly because I felt like they had some elements that are a little bit different and caught my attention a little bit more. The opening track actually grew on me a bit as well, actually, although I didn't enjoy it at first. The more I heard it, I started to like it more. But I just found quite a lot of the album I just didn't really connect with. And as such, I found bits of this quite forgettable. I think like vocally, it's technically incredible. But personally, the album didn't really tickle my funny bone, if you know what I'm saying. I love the fact that these guys are trying to keep kind of re-innovating and progressing their sound into new places, while simultaneously trying to still sound like Leprous. Unfortunately, this version of their sound didn't really excite me as much as previous efforts.
It's interesting because you mentioned a statement that was in the PR, which I never thought about, but now in context makes me wonder if the band are apprehensive. You said that, when I say you said, you read, as apparently you said, Dave, as the PR person in the UK. You read that they acknowledged that their fans should be able to move over to this sound.
Yeah.
Bands don't often say that. Bands don't often say, we hope our fans come with us. You know what I mean? Like, they don't often do that. Mm-hmm. I wonder if there's an acknowledgement here on some level through that statement that the band know themselves that there's maybe something that wasn't there that got them a lot of attention before. That last album was fucking huge. Yeah. Like, it was on the end of year list and everything. Maybe them saying, we kind of hope you stick with us while we go through this change. Yeah. So, in context now, that sounds a bit like the band maybe are a little bit aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
not
that's possible.
Backlash is the wrong word, but maybe a drop off.
Yeah. I mean, big love on the production. I think it sounds slick, but Leprous albums always do kind of deliver big in that area, to be honest. Like, the last album was incredible production wise as well. Unfortunately, aside from a kind of handful of tracks, I just felt a lot of this was kind of forgettable, to be honest.
I genuinely thought I was going to get I can't stress this, like, this is the one I've been nervous about all night. Really? Like, I thought, I'm going to get to the end of this and I'm just going to get an absolute fucking bollocking. But you tell me, like, I couldn't be any more wrong, and I clearly don't understand music, and why do I hate good things and all the rest. And I feel weirdly vindicated. I feel like actually my opinion counts for something. Don't hate it. Don't hate it. Just I keep coming back to see if the band themselves, see the people that aren't singing, just tried a little bit harder. I think they could be a much more interesting band.
Yeah. Okay. Final part of this. How do we score the new album from Leprous? What are you going to score Melodies of Atonement, Duncan?
3.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. I cannot go. To be honest, like, if you took the vocals out this equation, it would be a middle of the road 2.5, maybe a 3.
Yeah.
But the vocals are so good that you throw a point on top of that 3.5.
Yeah. I mean, I would 100% agree with you on that. I came into this thinking I was going to love it. I played the shit out of that last album. So the fact this didn't resonate with me is kind of gutting, to be honest. I wanted to love this so much. I like a handful of tracks, as I said, where there was certain moments that were a bit more to my taste and I found it a bit more exciting. But there's lots of it that I just didn't really gel with. As much as it's dynamically and very technically accomplished, just didn't get my juices flowing. So it's a 3.5 for me as well. So, Leprous, Melodies of Atonement, out on August 30th on InsideOut Music. Links below to the band, to the pre-order, Bandcamp and all that stuff. Check it out, have a listen, see what you think. Let us know your thoughts on it. Happy to hear your opinions. That is the review. Thanks for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
That is all because of you. The final lie. The lie.